Her fingernails were gone, torn off against the rocks somewhere between the second day and the third. Clara Jane Whitfield didn't notice anymore. She noticed only one thing forward, one arm, then the other. Drag, pull, breathe. Her broken legs scraped behind her like dead things she refused to bury. 18 miles to Copper Creek. 18 miles to a man she'd never met. 18 miles to keep the only promise she'd ever made for herself. She would crawl every inch if she had to. Welcome to a story of impossible survival and unbreakable will. Stay until the end to witness how one woman's refusal to die became the foundation of an extraordinary love. Like this video and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels across the world. Jacob Mercer stood at the Copper Creek Depot for the third day straight, and for the third day straight, the afternoon stage arrived without Clara Jane Whitfield on it. His daughter Hannah tugged his sleeve. "Papa, she ain't coming, is she?" Jake looked down at those blue eyes, Maggie's eyes, and felt the familiar twist in his chest. 7 years old, and already too acquainted with disappointment. "Don't know yet, little bird." But the stage came. She weren't on it. "Wasn't," he corrected automatically. "She wasn't on it." "That's what I said." The station master Hiram Fletcher shuffled out from behind his counter. He moved like a man carrying news he didn't want to deliver. "Mr. Mercer, got a telegram." Jake's hand tightened on Hannah's shoulder. She pressed closer to his leg. "Read it." Hiram glanced at Hannah. "Maybe the little one should—" "She stays. Read it." The old man unfolded the yellow paper. His hands trembled. "Westbound stage from Helena, overturned at Devil's Gorge, 23 miles south. Driver dead. 3 passengers." He paused. "No survivors expected." The words hit Jake like a fist to the gut. He absorbed them the way he'd learned to absorb bad news, straight on, no flinching. When what? When did it happen, the wreck?" Hiram checked the telegram again. "Says here, 5 days ago, July 15th. 5 days. Jake's mind worked through the arithmetic with brutal clarity. Clara's letter had promised arrival on July 18th. The stage had wrecked on the 15th, 3 days before her scheduled arrival. If the information was accurate, if the telegram had the dates right, if she'd survived the initial crash. List the passengers. Didn't give names, just said 3 plus the driver. Any women? Hiram's face crumpled. "Mr. Mercer, even if a woman survived that crash 5 days in Devil's Gorge without water, did the telegram say anything about women?" "No, sir, nothing specific." Hannah pulled at his coat. "Papa, what's Devil's Gorge?" Jake knelt down, bringing himself level with his daughter. She deserved truth, not soft lies that would hurt worse later. "It's badland country, little bird. Rock and sand and not much water. Hot in the day, cold at night." "Is that where Miss Clara is?" The question assumed so much. That Clara was the passenger. That she'd survived. That survival was still possible after 5 days in that hell. "I don't know." "Are we gonna find out?" Jake looked at his daughter, this small person who'd already lost her mother, who'd spent 2 years watching him stumble through grief like a man learning to walk again. She hadn't asked for another loss. Neither had he. But Clara Jane Whitfield had written him letters for 6 months. Careful letters. Honest letters. Letters that spoke of a woman who understood what it meant to endure. "I have never made a promise I didn't keep," she'd written in her final letter. "I will arrive July 18th, Mr. Mercer. Whatever stands between us and that meeting, I will find a way through it. Whatever stands between us." Jake stood. "Yeah, little bird. We're gonna find out." Mrs. Patterson from the Mercantile caught his arm as he headed for the livery. "Jacob Mercer, you ain't thinking of riding into the gorge. It's 23 miles of nothing. If that woman's dead, then I'll bury her proper. And if she's alive, then I'll bring her home." Mrs. Patterson's mouth pressed into a thin line. That ain't practical, Jacob. You got a ranch to run, a child to raise. You can't go chasing after some mail-order bride who probably— Ma'am. Jake's voice went quiet, which was worse than shouting. With respect, I ain't asked for your opinion. Someone needs to give it. That woman is a stranger. You've never even— I know what I've never done. He stepped past her. I also know what I promised. You promised her nothing. Letters ain't binding. Jake stopped, turned. Maybe not legally, but I wrote to that woman and told her she'd have a home here, told her she'd have a family, told her my daughter needed a mother and I needed a partner. His jaw tightened. If she's out there dying because she believed me, then I owe her more than a shrug and a too bad. Hannah appeared at his side, her small hand finding his. I want to come. Absolutely not, Mrs. Patterson said. That child belongs somewhere safe while you go off on this fool's errand. I want to come, Hannah repeated louder. Her chin jutted out Maggie's stubbornness in miniature. Miss Clara's supposed to be my new mama. I should help find her. Hannah, Jake started. You said she was coming. You read me her letters. She said she'd teach me piano and help me with my reading. And— Hannah's voice cracked. She said she'd be here, Papa. People who say they'll be here should be here. Jake closed his eyes. His daughter, 7 years old, still wounded by a mother who hadn't been able to stay, still waiting for someone to keep their promises. All right, he heard himself say. You ride with me. Mrs. Patterson threw up her hands. You've lost your mind. Probably. Jake headed for the livery, Hannah's hand tight in his. But I lost worse things and survived. Reckon I can survive being thought a fool. They rode out within the hour. Jake had packed methodically water for 3 days, hardtack bandages, laudanum for pain, whiskey for wounds. He'd added a shovel to the pack saddle without mentioning why. Hannah rode in front of him on his horse, her small body fitting against his chest like she'd been made for the space. The pack horse followed behind laden with supplies. The town fell away. The road stretched south toward country that got meaner with every mile. Papa. Yeah. Do you think Miss Clara is nice? Jake considered the question. He thought about Clara's letters, not the words themselves, but what lived between the words. The careful way she'd described her life in Virginia. The honesty about her age, her appearance, her circumstances. The complete absence of self-pity. I am 34 years old, she'd written. I have spent 16 years raising other people's children and managing other people's households. I am capable of hard work and harder choices. What I am not capable of is pretending to be something I am not. I think she's honest, Jake said finally. That's worth more than nice. What's the difference? Nice people tell you what you want to hear. Honest people tell you what you need to know. Hannah absorbed this. Mama was nice. The words hit somewhere soft. Maggie had been nice, sweet-natured and gentle and utterly unprepared for the brutality of Montana winters. Montana isolation, Montana demands. She'd smiled through her unhappiness until the unhappiness ate her alive. Yeah, Jake managed. She was. Is Miss Clara going to be different? Different how? Different so she don't die. Jake's arms tightened around his daughter. 7 years old, asking if this new mother would survive where the first one hadn't. I think Miss Clara knows how to fight, he said slowly. Some people know how to fight and some don't. Your mama? He paused, choosing words. Your mama knew how to love. That's a different thing. Can't people do both? Some can, best people do. They rode in silence for a while. The land changed around them, softening into harder edges, green giving way to brown life, retreating from the surface. Papa, yeah. If Miss Clara is dead, what happens? We bury her proper, and we go home. And then— Jake didn't have an answer. He'd spent 6 months building something in his head, a future with a partner, a mother for Hannah, a life that looked different from the lonely grind of the past 2 years. If Clara was dead, all that building collapsed into nothing. "Then we figure out what comes next," he said. "Same as always." They made camp at dusk, 10 miles from Copper Creek. Jake built a small fire, heated beans, made sure Hannah ate before allowing himself to rest. She fell asleep against his shoulder, her breath evening out into the rhythm of childhood trust. Jake sat awake watching stars wheel overhead, thinking about a woman he'd never met. Clara's last letter was in his coat pocket. He'd read it so many times the creases were wearing thin. "Mr. Mercer, by the time you read this, I will have left Virginia forever. I find I am not sad about this. A place is just a place. The people who made it meaningful are gone. My parents to death, my charges to their own lives, my position to a scandal I did not create. You asked in your last letter what I hope to find in Montana. I hope to find purpose. I hope to find belonging. I hope to find a man who values honesty over beauty and capability over grace. But mostly, Mr. Mercer, I hope to find a life I chose rather than a life I settled for. I have settled for 34 years. I am finished settling. I will see you July 18th. Yours in anticipation. Clara." Jane Whitfield. Jake folded the letter back into his pocket. He looked south toward Devil's Gorge, toward whatever remained of the woman who'd written those words. "Hold on," he murmured to the darkness. "I'm coming." Hugged. They reached Devil's Gorge by mid-afternoon the next day. The land had turned vicious red rock and loose shale, and nothing green for miles. The sun hammered down with the particular cruelty of Montana summer. Jake smelled the wreck before he saw it. Sweet and wrong. The smell of death ripening in heat. "Hannah." His voice sharpened. "Cover your nose with your bandana." "Why?" "Just do it." She obeyed. Jake did the same, then guided his horse toward the edge of the gorge, where the road hugged the rim. The stagecoach lay 50 feet down the slope, splintered and canted at an angle that spoke of violent tumbling. Debris scattered around it like a child's abandoned toys. Trunks, parcels, things rendered unrecognizable by impact. Bodies. Jake dismounted, lifted Hannah down. "Stay with the horses." "But..." "Stay." He met her eyes. "I mean it, little bird. Don't come down." For once, she didn't argue. Something in his face must have told her this wasn't a fight she'd win. Jake picked his way down the slope, loose rock sliding under his boots. The smell got worse. He tied his bandana tighter and kept moving. The driver lay near the road, thrown clear. 2 passengers, men by their clothing, were still tangled in the wreckage. Their deaths had been violent and quick. Small mercy. 3 bodies. The telegram had said 3 passengers plus the driver. Jake counted again. Driver. 2 male passengers. Where was the third? He circled the wreck, scanning the ground. Looking for there. Drag marks in the dust. 2 parallel grooves leading away from the wreck toward the canyon wall. Boot heels. Someone dragging themselves. Someone with legs that wouldn't work. Jake followed the marks. They led into the shadow of an overhang into a shallow depression where the rock created shelter from direct sun. 20 feet from the wreck. 20 feet of agony written in the dust. And at the end of the trail, dear God, she was curled against the stone like something trying to disappear. Her dress was shredded, her legs bent at angles that made his stomach drop. Dried blood crusted her face, her arms, her hands that were raw meat, fingernails gone skin, scraped down to muscle in places. But her chest rose and fell, shallow, rapid, alive. Clara. He didn't realize he'd said her name until her eyelids fluttered. Her eyes, when they opened, were fever-bright and unfocused. Late. The word came out cracked, barely audible. I'm late. Promised. July 18th. Jake knelt beside her. His hands hovered, unsure where to touch. Everything looked broken. Everything looked wrong. "You made it," he said. "You're here." The little girl. Her hand twitched, trying to rise. "Hannah, is she disappointed?" Something broke in Jake's chest. This woman, dying in a desert canyon, worried about disappointing a child she'd never met. "She's here. Rode with me to find you." Clara's eyes cleared for just a moment. Found his face. Really saw him for the first time. "You came. You gave your word you'd arrive. Seemed only fair I give mine to meet you." A sound escaped her. Might have been a laugh, if she'd had the moisture for it. Then her eyes rolled back, consciousness slipping away. Jake shrugged off his coat, laid it over her. Then he climbed back up the slope, faster than was safe. Hannah stood exactly where he'd left her, holding both horses' reins, white-knuckled. "Is she there, Papa?" "Yes." "Is she dead?" "Not yet." Jake grabbed the canteen, the medical supplies, the blanket. "But close. I need you to be brave now, Hannah. Braver than you've ever been." His daughter's chin lifted. Maggie's stubbornness, his own. "I can be brave. Good girl. Come with me." They worked as the sun sank toward the western rim. Jake cleaned Clara's wounds with whiskey and water, splinted her broken legs with branches and strips of blanket. His hands stayed steady. His mind stayed focused. The part of him that wanted to scream at the injustice of it, he locked that away for later. Hannah helped, passed bandages, held the canteen, talked in a quiet stream that seemed aimed more at Clara than at him. "We got a good ranch, Miss Clara. There's a creek that don't never dry up even in summer. Papa says I can have a kitten when we find one that's wild enough to survive winters. I know how to gather eggs without scaring the hens." Clara's eyes opened once during the work, fixed on Hannah. "Pretty girl," she whispered. "That's my daughter." Jake's voice came out rougher than intended. "That's Hannah. Hannah." Clara repeated the name like a prayer. "Told you. I'd come." "You did, ma'am. You surely did." "Not ma'am." Her cracked lips tried for a smile. Clara. Just Clara. Then she was gone again, pulled under by pain and exhaustion. Jake finished his rough field medicine and sat back on his heels. The task ahead was impossible. 23 miles back to Copper Creek. Clara couldn't ride, moving her wrong could kill her. But staying here meant watching her die by inches. "Papa," Hannah's voice was small. "What do we do?" Jake looked at his daughter, at the unconscious woman, at the brutal landscape that had nearly killed her. "We do the impossible, little bird." He stood. "Same as she did. We don't quit until we're home." He rigged a travois from branches and his spare blanket, 2 poles dragging behind the horse, a platform between them for Clara's body. It would jostle. It would hurt. It would be agonizing for all of them. But it was the only chance she had. When he lifted Clara onto the travois, she screamed. One raw animal sound that sent Hannah stumbling back with tears streaming down her face. Then Clara passed out again, her body's mercy. Jake secured her, checked the ropes, mounted his horse with Hannah in front of him. "How long to home?" Hannah asked. "Long time. We'll travel slow, stop when we need to." "Is Miss Clara gonna make it?" Jake looked back at the woman on the travois, the woman who'd dragged herself 20 feet with broken legs rather than break her word. The woman who'd asked about Hannah before asking about herself. "I don't know, little bird, but she's fought this long. We fight longer." They started moving as twilight painted the canyon walls purple. Slow, careful. Every jolt of the travois a new wound. Every mile a small victory. Behind them, the wreck site faded into darkness. Ahead, 23 miles of hard country waited to be crossed. Jake kept his eyes forward. 1 mile at a time. 1 breath at a time. 1 impossible step after another toward a future that might already be dying on the platform behind him. But he'd made a promise too. To a woman who kept hers at any cost. He intended to keep his. The travois hit a rock and Clara screamed. Not a word, not a plea. just raw sound ripped from somewhere deeper than consciousness. Jake pulled the horse to a stop, his whole body going rigid. "Papa," Hannah's voice shook. "I know." He dismounted fast, handed her the reins. "Hold him steady." Clara's eyes were open when he reached her. Wild, unfocused. Her fingers clawed at the blanket beneath her like she was trying to dig through stone. "Stop," she gasped. "Stop. Please, I can't." We stopped. Jake knelt beside the travois, his hand finding her forehead. Burning. The fever was climbing. "Clara. Clara, look at me." Her eyes found his face. For a moment, recognition flickered. The cowboy. "That's right. Jacob Mercer. You're on my travois headed to Copper Creek." "Can't." She shook her head, the motion weak. "Legs are shattered. You'll kill me moving. You'll die certain if I leave you here." "Then that's how it ends." Her jaw set even through the pain. "I chose this, knew the risks." "The hell you're dying in a canyon because some drunk stage driver missed a turn." Something sparked in her fever-bright eyes. "Wasn't drunk. Wheel broke. I saw it happen." She drew a shuddering breath. "Not his fault. Not anyone's fault. Just bad luck." "Bad luck don't mean you quit." "I ain't quitting." Her cracked lips twisted. "I crawled 20 feet with broken legs, Mr. Mercer. That ain't quitting. That's recognizing when the fight's over." Jake leaned closer. "Fight ain't over till you're dead. You dead yet?" "Getting there." "Then we keep moving." He stood before she could argue. Checked the splints, adjusted the ropes that held her in place. His hands moved with efficiency born of necessity. "How far?" Clara asked. 20 miles, maybe more." A sound escaped her, half laugh, half sob. 20 miles, might as well be the moon." "Then we go to the moon." Jake remounted, pulled Hannah back against his chest. "Hold on, Clara. This next stretch is rough." "It's all rough." "Yeah." He kicked the horse forward. "Welcome to Montana." They moved through darkness. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human suffering. Jake counted miles by landmarks. He could barely see rock formations, dead trees, the particular bend of a dry creek bed. Hannah fell asleep against him somewhere around mile 3. Her small body went limp with the absolute trust of childhood. Jake shifted her weight, made sure she was secure, and kept riding. Behind him, Clara drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she was silent. Sometimes she talked fragments of sentences that painted pictures of a life he was only beginning to understand. "Thornton children," she mumbled once. 3 generations. Taught them all. Not one of them remembered my birthday. Clara. 16 years. 16 years in that house. Invisible. Her voice cracked. Like furniture that talks. Jake didn't respond. Some confessions weren't meant to be answered. "Mother died when I was 12. Clara continued, her words slurring. "Father couldn't cope. Older sisters married off fast. I was the youngest, the useful one." A bitter laugh. "Always useful. Never valued." The horse stumbled. Clara cried out. Jake steadied the animal and kept moving. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for what you went through." "Don't be sorry." Her voice hardened even through the delirium. "Being sorry don't change nothing. I changed it myself, wrote to you, got on that stage." She paused. "Crawled through that canyon. Why? Why what? Why crawl 20 feet with broken legs? Why not just wait?" Silence stretched so long he thought she'd passed out again. Then, "Because I made a promise. To me. To myself." Clara's breath rattled. "Promised myself I'd get there. First promise I ever made that was mine. Not for my father, not for the Thorntons, not for anyone but me." Her hand moved on the travois, fingers spreading like she was reaching for something. "Couldn't break it. Even dying." couldn't break the first promise that was ever mine. Jake's throat tightened. He understood promises. He understood what it meant to cling to something when everything else had fallen away. "You kept it," he said. "I found you. You're going to Copper Creek." "Am I?" "You are. Might die on the way. Might. But you'll die moving forward, not giving up in a canyon." Another long silence. Then so quiet, he almost missed it. "Thank you." For what? For looking. Most people wouldn't have. Jake thought about the telegram. 3 passengers. No survivors expected. Hiram Fletcher's face when he delivered the news. Mrs. Patterson's dismissal of Clara as a stranger not worth the risk. Most people don't understand about promises. No. Clara's voice faded. They don't. She went quiet after that. Jake rode on. Sunrise found them 8 miles from Copper Creek. Jake stopped to water the horses to dribble moisture between Clara's cracked lips to let Hannah wake up enough to eat some hardtack. "Is Miss Clara still alive?" Hannah asked, chewing mechanically. "For now." "She talks funny when she's sleeping." "That's the fever. Makes people say things they wouldn't normally say." "She talked about being invisible." Hannah's brow furrowed. "What's that mean?" Jake crouched beside his daughter. "Means people looked at her, but didn't really see her. Didn't notice what she needed or wanted." "That's sad." "Yeah, little bird, it is." "We'll see her, won't we?" Hannah's voice held that particular intensity children got when they needed reassurance. "When she's better, we'll really see her." "We will." "Promise." Jake looked at his daughter, at the unconscious woman on the travois, at the hard miles still ahead. "Promise." They push it on. The next 3 hours blurred into a haze of heat and dust and endless forward motion. Jake's body moved automatically, guiding the horse, checking the travois, monitoring Clara's breathing. His mind drifted to darker places. What if she didn't make it? What if he'd ridden all this way? Put Hannah through all this trauma, just to deliver a corpse to Doc Whitman? What if Mr. Mercer? Clara's voice, clear, alert. Jake pulled up short. "Clara, stop the horse." "We're still 8 miles. Stop the horse." He stopped, dismounted. Hannah slid down after him. Clara's eyes were open, lucid. The fever still burned in her cheeks, but something had shifted. She looked at him with the particular focus of someone who'd made a decision. "I need to say something," she said. "While I can still think straight." "Save your strength." "Might not have strength later." Clara's hand found his, her grip weak but deliberate. "Listen to me, Jacob Mercer." The use of his full name stopped him. He listened. "I wrote you letters for 6 months," Clara said. "Careful letters. Honest letters. But I left something out." Jake's chest tightened. "What?" "Why I really left Virginia." Clara's eyes didn't waver. "It wasn't just loneliness. Wasn't just wanting something different." "Then what?" "There was a man, Edmund Crane, reverend at the church the Thorntons attended." Clara's voice went flat. "He took an interest in me. Said he could help me find a position after the scandal. Said he knew people." Jake waited. Something cold settled in his gut. "He didn't want to help me." Clara's fingers tightened on his. "He wanted to own me. When I refused, he said he'd make sure I never worked again. Said he'd spread rumors. Said he'd—" She stopped. Drew a ragged breath. "I ran. Got on the first westbound stage I could find." "That why you answered my advertisement?" "Partly." Clara met his eyes. "Partly because your letters sounded honest. Sounded like a man who meant what he said." Her voice cracked. "I've spent my whole life around men who didn't mean what they said. I wanted to find one who did." Jake absorbed this. The information settled into the picture he was building of Clara Jane Whitfield, a woman who'd survived loneliness and exploitation and scandal, who'd crawled through a desert with broken legs rather than break her word. "Is he likely to follow?" Jake asked. "This crane, don't know. Maybe." Clara's grip loosened. "Wanted you to know. Before I die, wanted you to know what you might be getting into." "You ain't dying." "Might be." "Then you can tell me the rest when you're better." Jake straightened. "For now, we got 8 miles to cover." Clara's eyes searched his face. "You're not angry that I didn't tell you before. You're telling me now. That's what matters." "Most men would." "I ain't most men." Jake lifted Hannah back onto the horse mounted behind her. "And you ain't most women. Reckon that makes us even." He kicked the horse forward before Clara could respond. Behind him, he heard her breath catch pain or emotion he couldn't tell. Either way, they kept moving. The last 8 miles took 4 hours. Jake's horse stumbled twice. The pack horse threw a shoe. Hannah cried for the first time when they stopped to rest and saw Clara's condition in full daylight, the destroyed hands, the twisted legs, the fever-flushed face. "She looks dead, Papa." "She ain't dead. But she looks. Looking ain't being." Jake pulled Hannah close. "Remember that little bird. People can look all kinds of ways and be something different underneath." "Is Miss Clara different underneath?" Jake looked at the woman on the travois. "Broken. Fever-ridden. Barely conscious." "Yeah," he said quietly. "She's stronger than she looks." Copper Creek appeared on the horizon at mid-afternoon. Just a smudge at first, then buildings, then people emerging from doorways to stare at the strange procession. Hiram Fletcher ran from the depot. "Dear God, you found her. Get Doc Whitman." Jake's voice came out as a croak. "Now." "Is she?" "Now, Hiram." The old man ran. People gathered as Jake guided the horse through town. Mrs. Patterson, the blacksmith, the women from the mercantile. They stared at Clara like she was something from a nightmare. This shattered woman who'd somehow survived what should have killed her. "Lord have mercy," someone whispered. "How is she alive? Look at her hands." "That ain't possible." Jake ignored them all. He focused on the road ahead, on the doctor's house at the end of the street, on getting Clara somewhere she could fight her battle with proper help. Doc Whitman met them at his door. His face went pale when he saw Clara's condition, but his hands stayed steady as he helped transfer her from the travois to a bed inside. "How long?" he asked. 5 days in the canyon, day and a half on the travois. She shouldn't be alive. Tell her that." Doc Whitman's examination took an hour. Jake sat in the outer room with Hannah, both of them too exhausted to speak. The silence felt heavy, final. When the doctor emerged, his face was grim. "Both legs broken in multiple places. The left might heal clean. The right," he paused. "The knee joint is damaged. Even if she survives the fever, she may never walk properly again. But she'll live." "I don't know." Whitman rubbed his eyes. "The infection concerns me. It's deep in some of those wounds. If it spreads to the bone..." "What do you need?" "Time, prayer, luck." The doctor looked at Jake with something like admiration. "And whatever spirit she's got that made her crawl 20 feet with shattered legs. That's what's kept her alive this long." "Can I see her?" "She's unconscious. Probably will be for days." Whitman stepped aside. "But yes, you can see her." Jake entered the sick room alone. Hannah had fallen asleep on the settee, exhaustion finally winning. Clara lay on the bed, her legs splinted and elevated, her hands wrapped in clean bandages. The fever flush had faded slightly, or maybe that was just the lamplight. Her breathing was steady, shallow but steady. Jake pulled a chair close and sat. "You made it," he said quietly. "Devil's Gorge to Copper Creek. Told you we'd get here." No response. He hadn't expected one. "Hannah's asleep in the other room. She asked about you the whole ride. Kept saying, 'Is Miss Clara gonna be okay?' Like you were already hers." Jake's voice caught. Maybe you are. Maybe that's how it works. You claim someone in your heart before you ever meet them. Clara's fingers twitched on the coverlet. Reflex, probably. But Jake took her hand anyway, careful of the bandages. I read your letters so many times I memorized them, he continued. That last one especially, where you said you'd find a way through whatever stood between us. He shook his head. I thought that was just words. Pretty words from a woman trying to impress a stranger. He leaned closer. It wasn't, was it? You meant every word. You found a way through a stage wreck and broken legs and 5 days of hell. You crawled toward a promise when anyone else would have given up. Clara's eyelids flickered. For a moment, he thought she might wake. But she settled again, her breath evening out. I don't know if you can hear me, Jake said. But I want you to know something. Whatever happens next, if you heal, or if you don't, if you walk, or if you can't, you've already proven more than I ever expected. More than I deserved. He squeezed her fingers gently. So you fight Clara Jane Whitfield. You fight like you fought in that canyon. And when you wake up, we'll figure out the rest together. Outside, the town settled into evening. Inside, Jake kept his vigil. Somewhere in the space between consciousness and oblivion, Clara's hand tightened fractionally around his, and held on. 3 days passed. Clara didn't wake. Doc Whitman changed her bandages twice daily, his face growing grimmer each time. The infection in her right leg wasn't responding to treatment. The fever spiked and fell and spiked again. You should prepare yourself, Whitman said on the morning of the 3rd day. If the fever doesn't break by tonight, it'll break. Mr. Mercer, it'll break. The doctor looked at Jake, unshaven, exhausted, still wearing the same clothes he'd ridden in. Then he looked at Hannah, who sat beside Clara's bed, reading aloud from a book of fairy tales, her voice steady, even when the woman couldn't hear her. You're both remarkable, Whitman said quietly. But remarkable doesn't always win. Maybe not. Jake's jaw tightened. But it don't quit either. That afternoon, Reverend Thomas Ashby came to visit. A thin man with kind eyes. He'd been the one to bury Maggie 2 years ago. Jake trusted him as much as he trusted anyone in Copper Creek. I heard about what happened, Ashby said. The whole town's talking. Let them talk. They're saying you're a fool. Ashby settled into a chair. They're also saying you might be the bravest man in Montana. Ain't brave, just stubborn. Sometimes that's the same thing. The Reverend glanced toward the sick room. How is she? Fighting. For how long? Jake didn't answer. He didn't have an answer. Ashby leaned forward. Jacob, I've known you since you came to this territory. I watched you build that ranch from nothing. I watched you bury a wife and raise a daughter alone. I've never seen you ask for help. Don't need help. Everyone needs help sometimes. Ashby's voice gentled. Whatever happens with Miss Whitfield, if she lives, or if she doesn't, you don't have to carry it alone. Jake's throat tightened. He thought about Clara's letters, about the loneliness she'd described, about being invisible. She carried things alone her whole life, he said. Nobody ever helped her. Nobody ever even saw her. Then maybe, Ashby said softly, she found the right person to finally see her. The fever broke at midnight. Jake was dozing in the chair beside Clara's bed when her breathing changed, deepened, settled into something more normal. He was on his feet instantly, his hand finding her forehead. Cool, not cold, not burning, just cool. Doc! Jake's voice cracked. Doc Whitman. The doctor came running still in his nightshirt. He checked Clara's pulse, her temperature, her pupil response. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. She's better. The fever broke. Whitman shook his head in disbelief. Her body's still got a hell of a fight ahead, but the immediate crisis has passed. She's gonna live." "I didn't say that." The doctor straightened. "I said the fever broke. There's still infection to deal with. Still bones that may not heal right. But she's got a chance." Whitman looked at Jake, at the hope in his eyes, at the exhaustion that couldn't quite hide it. "Yeah," the doctor said finally. "She's got a chance." Clara's eyes opened an hour later. This time, they were clear, focused, present. Jake was still beside her. He'd sent Hannah to sleep at the Pattersons' house, wanting to be alone, when if Clara woke. "You stayed." Her voice was a rasp, barely audible. Didn't have anywhere better to be. Clara's cracked lips curved. The faintest smile. "Liar. You've got a ranch. A daughter. A life." "Got a wife, too." Jake caught her hand. "Leastways, that was the plan. If she's still interested." Clara's eyes searched his face. "You've seen me at my worst now. Broken legs, fever, raving about my past." Her voice cracked. "Still interested?" "More than before." "Why?" Jake thought about the question, thought about all the reasons he should walk away. The complications, the risks, the uncertainty of her recovery. Then he thought about the woman who'd crawled through a canyon rather than break her word. "Because you're real," he said finally. "Most people I meet are playing parts, pretending to be something they're not. But you," he shook his head, "you crawled 20 feet with broken legs because you made a promise. That ain't a woman who pretends." Clara's fingers tightened on his, weak but present. "I'm going to be trouble," she whispered. "Damaged goods. Might not walk right again. Might not—" "Clara." She stopped. Jake leaned closer. "I didn't ride into Devil's Gorge looking for perfect. I rode in looking for a woman who keeps her word." He held her gaze. "I found her. Everything else is just details." For a long moment, Clara didn't speak. Her eyes glistened in the lamplight. Then, "Hannah. Where is she?" "Sleeping at the Pattersons. I'll bring her in the morning. She stayed the whole time. Wouldn't leave. Read you stories while you were out. Said you needed to know someone was there." Clara's face crumpled. Not with pain, with something deeper. Something that had been locked away for a very long time. "I never—" She stopped. Started again. "No one ever." "I know." Jake squeezed her hand. "But someone does now. Get used to it." Clara closed her eyes. A single tear tracked down her temple into her hair. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared I'll disappoint you. Scared I'll disappoint Hannah. Scared I'll end up being another burden you have to carry. You carried yourself through hell. You ain't a burden. You're a partner. You don't know that yet." "No." Jake settled back in his chair, keeping her hand in his. "But I intend to find out." Clara's eyes opened again. Something had shifted in them. The fear was still there, but underneath it, something else. Something that looked like the beginning of hope. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, what?" "Okay. Let's find out together." Outside, dawn was breaking over Copper Creek. A new day. A new chance. Jake sat beside the woman who'd crawled through fire to reach him, and for the first time in 2 years, he let himself believe in tomorrow. Hannah arrived at Doc Whitman's house before the sun was fully up. She burst through the door like a small tornado, her braids flying, her eyes wild with hope and fear. "Is she awake?" "Mrs. Patterson said the fever broke. Is she—" "Quiet little bird." Jake caught her mid-run. "She's awake, but she's weak. You need to be gentle." "I can be gentle." Hannah squirmed in his grip. "Please, Papa. Please let me see her." Jake looked at Clara, who'd managed to prop herself up slightly against the pillows. She nodded, the movement small but deliberate. "Let her come." Jake released his daughter. Hannah approached the bed with a sudden surprising caution, like she was approaching a wild animal she didn't want to spook. "Miss Clara." "Hello, Hannah." Clara's voice was still rough, but warmth lived in it. "I've heard a lot about you." You have... Your papa read me your letters, the ones you helped him write. Clara's cracked lips curved. You have beautiful handwriting. Hannah's face flushed with pleasure. Papa made me practice. Said if I was going to help write to his future wife, I better not embarrass him. You didn't embarrass anyone. Clara's hand moved on the coverlet fingers extending. You can come closer. I don't bite. Hannah inched forward until she stood beside the bed. Her eyes traveled over Clara's bandaged hands, her splinted legs the bruises that mottled her face. Does it hurt? Yes. A lot. Yes. Hannah considered this. You're brave. I'm stubborn. There's a difference. That's what Papa says too. Hannah's small hand found Clara's careful of the bandages. He says stubborn is better than brave sometimes. Your papa's a smart man? I know. Hannah squeezed gently. I'm glad you didn't die, Miss Clara. The bluntness of it, the pure, unfiltered honesty of childhood hit Clara like a physical blow. Her eyes filled. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. They stayed like that for a long moment. Jake watched from the doorway, something shifting in his chest. His daughter holding hands with the woman who'd crawled through hell to reach them. His future taking shape in the quiet space between two people who'd never met before this moment. Then Doc Whitman appeared, breaking the spell. I need to check those dressings. His voice was apologetic but firm. Miss Hannah, maybe you could wait in the other room. But I just got here. Hannah. Jake's voice left no room for argument. Mind the doctor. Hannah's jaw set Maggie's stubbornness, but she obeyed. She released Clara's hand slowly, reluctantly. I'll be right outside, she said. If you need anything. I know. Clara managed a smile. Thank you, Hannah. The examination took 20 minutes. Jake waited in the outer room with Hannah, listening to the murmur of voices, the occasional sharp intake of breath when something hurt. When Whitman emerged, his face was carefully neutral. Well, the left leg is setting well. I'm optimistic about a full recovery there. The doctor paused. The right leg is more complicated. Complicated how? The knee joint sustained significant damage. Even with perfect healing, she may have limited mobility. A permanent limp is almost certain. Full function. Whitman shook his head. I can't promise that. Jake absorbed this. But she'll walk. Eventually, with crutches at first, then a cane. She'll need months of careful rehabilitation. The doctor met Jake's eyes. This is going to be a long road, Mr. Mercer. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared for whatever it takes. Whitman nodded slowly. Then let's talk about moving her. 2 weeks later, Clara was stable enough to be transported to Jake's ranch. The journey was agonizing. Every bump in the road sent pain shooting through Clara's legs. Every jolt made her gasp. But she refused to complain, refused to ask them to stop. Almost there, Jake said for the third time. Just another mile. You've said that twice already. Third time's the charm. Clara laughed, then winced when the movement jarred her legs. Don't make me laugh. It hurts. Sorry. No, you're not. No, Jake admitted. I'm not. Good to hear you laugh. Hannah rode beside the wagon, her small face serious with responsibility. She'd appointed herself Clara's official guardian, bringing water when Clara looked thirsty, adjusting blankets when she shivered, chattering to fill silences when the pain got too quiet. That's our road, Hannah announced, pointing. See where it turns. That's where our land starts. Clara craned her neck, trying to see. It's beautiful country. Wait till you see the creek. Papa says I can show you the best fishing spots once you're better. I'd like that. You ever been fishing before? Never? Then I'll teach you. Hannah's chest puffed with importance. I'm a good teacher. Papa says so. I'm sure you are. The ranch came into view 20 minutes later. Clara's breath caught. It wasn't grand. A log cabin with a wide porch. A barn that had seen better days. Corrals and outbuildings scattered across a valley floor. But it was solid. Real. A home someone had built with their own hands. It ain't much, Jake said, suddenly uncertain. I know it's not what you're used to. It's perfect. He looked at her sharply. You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it to be polite. Clara's eyes moved over the property, taking in every detail. I'm saying it because I've spent my whole life in other people's houses. This is the first place that might actually be mine. Something shifted in Jake's expression. He didn't respond, just guided the wagon toward the cabin with a gentleness that spoke louder than words. Getting Clara into the house required 3 people. Jake carried most of her weight, his arms careful around her damaged body. Hannah held doors and cleared paths. Mrs. Patterson, who'd ridden out to help, despite her earlier disapproval, supervised the whole operation with clucking concern. Easy now, watch that step. For heaven's sake, Jake, don't jostle her. I've got her, Margaret. You've got her injured is what you've got. Lord, the state of this poor woman. I can hear you, Clara said dryly. And I've been in worse states. Mrs. Patterson's mouth snapped shut. She looked at Clara, really looked at her for the first time. I suppose you have, she said finally. I suppose you have at that. They settled Clara in the bedroom that had once belonged to Jake and Maggie. Fresh sheets, clean pillows, a window that looked out over the valley. Clara noticed the photograph on the bedside table immediately. Is that her Maggie? Jake froze. He'd forgotten to move it. Hadn't even thought about the photograph being there, about what it might mean to bring another woman into this space. I can take it down. Don't. Clara's voice was gentle but firm. She was Hannah's mother. She belonged here first. I'm not trying to erase her. Jake stared at this woman. This impossible woman who'd crawled through a desert to reach him, who was now lying in his dead wife's bed, looking at his dead wife's photograph and offering grace instead of jealousy. You're something else, Clara Jane Whitfield. So I've been told. Her lips curved. Usually not as a compliment. Mrs. Patterson left at sunset with strict instructions for Clara's care. Jake saw her to her wagon, bracing for the lecture he knew was coming. That woman, Mrs. Patterson said slowly. What about her? She's not what I expected. What did you expect, Mrs.? Patterson was quiet for a moment. Someone softer, someone who'd break under all this. She shook her head. She ain't gonna break, is she? No, ma'am, I don't believe she is. Then you're lucky, Jacob Mercer. Mrs. Patterson climbed onto her wagon. Luckier than you deserve, probably. Probably. She drove off without another word. Jake watched her go, then returned to the cabin. He found Hannah sitting on the floor beside Clara's bed, reading aloud from a battered copy of Grimm's fairy tales. Clara's eyes were closed, but she was smiling. And the princess said, I'd rather marry a frog than a prince who breaks his promises. And the frog said, Ribbit. Hannah giggled. No, Miss Clara. Frogs in fairy tales don't say ribbit. They say wise things. My mistake. What did the wise frog say? He said, a promise kept is worth more than a crown. Clara's eyes opened, met Jake's across the room. Smart frog, she said quietly. The smartest? Hannah agreed. That's why the princess married him. I thought she'd rather marry a frog than a prince. This frog was better than a prince. He kept his word. Clara's hand found Hannah's hair, stroking gently. Then she made the right choice. Jake cleared his throat. Time for bed, little bird. But I'm not done with the story. Story will be here tomorrow. Miss Clara needs rest. Hannah's lower lip jutted out, but she didn't argue. She stood, placed a careful kiss on Clara's cheek, and headed for her own room. Good night, Miss Clara. Good night, Hannah. When the child was gone, silence settled over the room. Jake moved to the chair beside Clara's bed, the same position he'd held for days at Doc Whitman's. You don't have to stay, Clara said. I'm sure you have things. Nowhere I'd rather be. You keep saying things like that. Because I keep meaning them. Clara turned her head on the pillow, studying him. Why? Why what? Why are you so certain you've known me for 3 weeks, Jake? 2 of those I was unconscious. We've barely had a real conversation. How can you be so sure this is what you want? Jake considered the question. He could give her the easy answer, the one about promises and letters, and the way she'd crawled through hell. But that wasn't the whole truth. My wife, he said slowly. Maggie. She was sweet, kind. Everything a man's supposed to want. Clara's expression flickered. But she wasn't strong. Not where it counted. When things got hard, the isolation, the winters, the loneliness, she broke. Little by little, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. Jake's voice dropped. I loved her. I love her still. But I couldn't save her. I couldn't be enough to fill all the empty spaces she carried. Jake, let me finish. He leaned forward. I see you, Clara. I see someone who's been carrying empty spaces her whole life, who's been alone even in crowded rooms, who's been overlooked and undervalued and taken for granted. That's not exactly flattering. But here's the difference. Jake's eyes held hers. Maggie let the empty spaces swallow her. You filled yours with steel. Clara's breath caught. You didn't break, Jake continued. Not when you lost your family. Not when you lost your position. Not when you were lying in a canyon with broken legs and nothing but death ahead of you. He shook his head. You crawled 20 feet toward a promise you'd made to a stranger. I didn't have a choice. Everybody has a choice. You chose to fight. Jake took her bandaged hand in his, gentle as holding glass. I don't want sweet Clara. I don't want kind. I want someone who'll stand beside me when standing is hard. Someone who won't break when the winters come. Clara's eyes glistened. I'm going to disappoint you. Everyone does eventually. Maybe. But I'd rather be disappointed by you than safe with anyone else. A tear escaped, tracked down her temple. Jake caught it with his thumb. It's late, he said. You should sleep. Will you stay? Till morning. Clara's fingers tightened on his. Then I'll sleep. She closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out. Jake sat in the darkness holding the hand of the woman who'd crawled through fire to reach him and wondered at the strange paths that led broken people to each other. Morning brought complications. Reverend Thomas Ashby arrived at the ranch just after breakfast, his face grave. We need to talk, Jacob. Jake stepped onto the porch, pulling the door closed behind him. What's wrong? There's been talk in town about your arrangement. What kind of talk? The kind that questions propriety. Ashby shifted uncomfortably. An unmarried woman living in a widower's home. She's recovering from near death. Where else would she be? People don't see it that way. They see... I don't care what they see. You should. Ashby's voice firmed. You have a daughter, Jacob. A reputation. A standing in this community. If people decide to make this into a scandal, let them. It's not that simple. Then make it simple. Jake's jaw tightened. Tell your congregation that Clara Jane Whitfield is my intended wife. Tell them she survived a stage wreck and crawled through Devil's Gorge to keep her word to me. Tell them I rode into the Badlands and brought her home. His voice dropped. And tell them that anyone who has a problem with that arrangement can take it up with me directly. Ashby studied Jake for a long moment. Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. You're certain about this? About her? More certain than I've been about anything in years. Then I'll marry you. Ashby straightened. Whenever you're ready. Soon as Miss Whitfield can stand for the ceremony. Might be months before she can stand. Then we'll do it sitting. The Reverend allowed himself a small smile. I don't recall the good book saying anything about the bride's posture. Jake felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Thank you, Thomas. Don't thank me yet. Ashby's face sobered. The talk won't stop just because you're engaged. Some folks in this town have long memories and sharp tongues. I've dealt with worse. I know you have. Ashby tipped his hat. I'll be by next week to discuss the details. He rode off, leaving Jake alone on the porch with the morning sun and a head full of plans that kept getting more complicated. Inside, Clara was awake. She'd heard everything. You don't have to marry me. Jake turned from the door. I know. I mean it, Jake. If people are talking, if it's causing problems. Let me ask you something. He crossed to her bedside. Do you want to marry me? Clara's mouth opened, closed. Her eyes dropped to her lap. That's not the point. It's exactly the point. Jake sat on the edge of the bed. I ain't asking because of reputation. I ain't asking because of what people think. I'm asking because I want to know. Clara's voice faltered. I came here to marry you. That was the agreement. Agreements can be changed, especially when circumstances change. He caught her chin, tilted her face up. Do you want to marry me, Clara? Not because you promised. Not because you got nowhere else to go. Do you want it? Clara's eyes met his. In them, he saw fear, doubt, hope, and underneath it all, something that looked like the beginning of love. Yes, she whispered. God help me, yes. Then that's settled. Jake released her chin. We marry as soon as you're able. But I can't even walk. I'll carry you if I have to. That's ridiculous. So's crawling through a desert with broken legs. He allowed himself the smile. We ain't normal people, Clara. Might as well have a wedding that matches. Clara laughed, then immediately gripped her side. Don't, it hurts. I'll try to be less charming. You do that. But she was smiling. And for the first time since the fever broke, Jake thought maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. 3 more weeks passed. Clara's recovery was slow, painful, marked by setbacks that tested everyone's patience. The first time she tried to sit up alone, she failed. The second time she fell. The third time she made it and immediately vomited from the pain. I can't do this, she gasped, lying back against the pillows. I can't. You can. Jake's voice was hard, unyielding. You crawled through a canyon, Clara. You can sit up in a damn bed. That was different. How? I was dying. I didn't have a choice. You've got a choice now. Choose to fight. Clara's eyes flashed. You think I'm not fighting? You think this is me giving up? I think this is you feeling sorry for yourself. I have a right to feel sorry for myself. Look at me. Look at what I am now. A cripple who can't even... Finish that sentence. Jake's voice went dangerous. I dare you. Clara's mouth snapped shut. You're not a cripple. Jake leaned closer. You're a woman healing from injuries that should have killed you. There's a difference. Is there? Yeah. One gives up. One keeps fighting. He held her gaze. Which one are you? Clara stared at him for a long moment. Then her jaw set. Hand me the crutches. Clara. You heard me. Hand me the goddamn crutches. Jake retrieved them from beside the door. Clara grabbed them with hands that were still raw, still healing. Step back, she ordered. He stepped back. What followed was brutal to watch. Clara swung her legs over the side of the bed, slowly, agonizingly. She positioned the crutches under her arms. She pushed. Her legs screamed, her arms shook, her face went white with pain. But she stood for 3 seconds, 5, 10, then her right leg buckled and Jake caught her before she hit the floor. Damn! Clara gasped against his chest. Damn, damn, damn! 10 seconds. Jake lowered her back to the bed. That's 10 more than yesterday. 10 seconds doesn't mean anything. 10 seconds means everything. He arranged the pillows behind her. Tomorrow you'll do 15. Next week 30. By fall, you'll be walking." Clara looked up at him, exhausted, defeated, but underneath it a spark of that steel he'd seen from the beginning. "You really believe that?" "I do." "Why?" "Because you're too stubborn to prove me wrong." Clara's cracked lips curved. "Arrogant bastard!" "So you've said." Jake pulled the blanket over her legs. "Now rest. You've got more fighting to do tomorrow." Clara closed her eyes. "Jake." "Yeah. Thank you for not letting me quit." "That's what partners do." A small smile. "Partners. I like the sound of that." "Good." Jake settled into his chair. "Now sleep." She slept, and in the morning she stood for 15 seconds, then 20, then a minute. By the time August ended, Clara could walk from the bed to the door with her crutches. By September, she could make it to the porch. By October, she was helping Hannah with her letters, was managing the household accounts, was slowly, painfully, impossibly reclaiming her life. "I want to marry you," she said one evening as they sat together watching the sunset. Jake looked at her sharply. "That's what we've been planning." "I know, but I want you to know I want it now, not because I promised, not because I have to." She met his eyes. "Because I choose to. I choose you, Jacob Mercer, you and Hannah, this ranch, this life. Even though it's hard, especially because it's hard." Clara's hand found his. "I spent 34 years having life happen to me. For the first time, I am making it happen myself." Jake lifted her hand, pressed his lips to her knuckles. "Saturday," he said. "What? We marry Saturday. Reverend Ashby can come out to the ranch. Small ceremony. Just us, and whoever wants to witness. I can't stand for a whole ceremony. Then we do it with you sitting. I don't care if you're lying flat on your back, Clara. I'm marrying you Saturday." Clara's eyes filled. "You're impossible." "So are you." He pulled her close, careful of her legs. "That's why this works." She laughed into his chest. "I suppose it is." Outside, the Montana sky blazed orange and red and gold. Inside, two people who'd found each other through impossible circumstances held on tight. Saturday was coming, and nothing, not pain, not gossip, not the long road still ahead was going to stop them. Saturday morning arrived with frost on the windows and fire in the hearth. Clara woke before dawn, her heart racing with something that wasn't pain for the first time in months. Today she would become Clara Mercer. Hannah burst into the room without knocking, her arms full of wildflowers she'd gathered the day before. "You're awake. Good. I picked these for your hair. Mrs. Patterson said brides need flowers in their hair. Do you want the yellow ones or the purple ones? I like the purple ones, but it's your wedding, so you should choose." Clara laughed, the sound still unfamiliar after so many years of holding everything inside. "Purple, then, to match my bruises." "Your bruises are almost gone." Hannah climbed onto the bed, careful of Clara's legs. "Papa says you're healing faster than Doc Whitman expected." "Your papa says a lot of things. He means them, though." Hannah's small face went serious. "Papa don't say things he don't mean. That's why I knew you were coming. Because he said you were, and Papa don't lie." Clara's throat tightened. "Your papa is a good man." "I know." Hannah began arranging flowers against Clara's hair, testing colors. "Are you scared?" "Of what?" "Of getting married. Of being my mama." Hannah's hands stilled. "Of staying forever." The question hit somewhere deep. Clara reached up, caught Hannah's fingers. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "But the good kind of terrified. The kind that means something important is happening." "Is that different from the bad kind?" "The bad kind makes you run away. The good kind makes you stay, even though you're scared." Hannah considered this with the gravity only a 7-year-old could muster. "I was scared when Mama died. The bad kind. I wanted to run away, but I didn't know where to go." "Oh, sweetheart." "But then Papa said you were coming, and I got scared the good kind." Hannah met Clara's eyes. I stayed. I waited. And you came. Clara pulled the child into her arms, ignoring the protest from her damaged legs. I came, and I'm staying. That's a promise, Hannah Ruth Mercer. You can't break promises. No, I can't. They held each other until Jake's voice came from the doorway. Ladies, Reverend Ashby just arrived. Clara looked up. Jake stood there in his best clothes, clean shirt, brushed coat boots that actually shone. He'd shaved, trimmed his hair. He looked like a man about to do something that mattered. You look handsome, Clara said. You look alive. Jake's eyes moved over her face. That's all I ever wanted to see. Romantic. I try. The ceremony was small. Reverend Ashby, Doc Whitman and his wife, Mrs. Patterson, who'd softened considerably over the past weeks, Hannah standing beside Clara's chair like a tiny sentinel. Clara couldn't stand for the whole ceremony. Her right leg wouldn't support her for that long, so Jake had positioned a chair near the hearth. Not traditional, not proper, but theirs. Dearly beloved. Ashby began. We are gathered here to witness the union of Jacob Mercer and Clara Jane Whitfield. Clara's hands trembled. Jake noticed, reached over, took them in his own. Nervous, he murmured. Terrified. Good kind or bad kind? Ask me after. Ashby continued, his words washing over them like water. Clara heard fragments. Love, honor. Cherish, sickness, health. But mostly, she watched Jake's face. The steadiness in his eyes. The certainty in his grip. This man had ridden into a desert to find her. Had carried her home on a travois. Had sat beside her bed for days while she fought fever and infection and despair. He'd seen her at her absolute worst. And he was still here. Do you, Jacob, take Clara to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. No hesitation, no pause. Do you, Clara, take Jacob to be your lawfully wedded husband? Clara's voice came out stronger than she expected. I do. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Ashby smiled. You may kiss your bride. Jake knelt beside her chair, bringing himself to her level. His hand cupped her face, gentle, as holding something precious. Hello, wife. Hello, husband. He kissed her. Soft. Slow. A promise sealed with lips instead of words. When they pulled apart, Hannah launched herself at both of them. We're a family now. A real family. Can I call you Mama? Mrs. Patterson said, I should ask first, but I don't want to wait anymore. Can I please? Clara's eyes filled. She looked at Jake, who nodded. Yes, sweetheart. You can call me Mama. Mama. Hannah tested the word, her face glowing. Mama. Mama, Mama. I like how it sounds. Me too, little bird. Clara pulled her close. Me too. The celebration was modest cake that Mrs. Patterson had baked, whiskey that Jake had been saving, music from a fiddle that Doc Whitman produced from somewhere. But it felt like more. It felt like the beginning of something real. As evening fell and the guests departed, Clara found herself alone with her new family. Jake carried her to the bedroom. Their bedroom now, while Hannah skipped ahead to prepare the bed. I can walk. Humor me. Jake's arms tightened around her. It's our wedding night. I'm allowed to carry my bride. Carrying implies I'm helpless. Carrying implies I'm strong enough to lift you. Let me have this. Clara laughed, letting her head rest against his shoulder. Fine, but just tonight. We'll negotiate tomorrow. He laid her on the bed with exaggerated care, like she was made of porcelain. Hannah had scattered more wildflowers across the pillow's purple ones as promised. Good night, Mama. Good night, Papa. Hannah planted kisses on both of them, then scampered to her own room. Silence settled. Jake stood beside the bed, suddenly uncertain. I can sleep in the chair. Jacob Mercer. Clara's voice cut through his hesitation. Get in this bed. Your legs. My legs will survive. Now stop hovering and lie down. He did, carefully, keeping to his side of the mattress like there was an invisible wall between them. Clara sighed. Closer. I don't want to hurt you. You're hurting me by being so far away. She reached for him. Please, Jake. I've been alone for 34 years. I don't want to be alone on my wedding night. Something broke behind his eyes. He moved closer, his arm sliding beneath her, drawing her against his chest. Better. Better. They lay together in the darkness, learning the shape of each other. Clara's head on his shoulder, his hand tracing patterns on her back, the fire crackling low in the hearth. I'm scared, Clara whispered. Of what? Of waking up. Of finding out this was all a dream. Jake's arm tightened. It's real. I'm real. This is real. Promise. I promise. Clara closed her eyes. For the first time in months, years, maybe she felt safe. Jake. Yeah. Thank you. For finding me. For not giving up. I should be thanking you. His voice rumbled against her ear. For crawling. For fighting. For choosing us when you could have chosen to die. Dying would have been easier. But you didn't choose easy. You chose hard. He pressed a kiss to her hair. That's why I knew you were the one. Because I'm stubborn. Because you're unbreakable. Clara's eyes stung. I feel pretty broken right now. Broken and unbreakable aren't opposites. Jake's hand found hers, fingers lacing together. You can be both at the same time. You can be healing and strong, scared and brave, damaged and whole. That doesn't make sense. Neither does crawling through a desert with broken legs. But you did it anyway. Clara turned her face into his chest, breathing him in. Leather and wood smoke and something uniquely Jake. I love you, she said. The words came out without planning, without calculation. Just truth bare and unprotected. Jake went still beneath her. For one terrible moment, Clara thought she'd said too much too soon. Then his arms crushed her against him. I love you too, Clara Mercer. Have since I pulled you out of that canyon. Maybe since before. Before you met me? Your letters. His voice was rough. You wrote things I'd never heard anyone say. Honest things. Real things. I fell in love with your words before I ever saw your face. My face was covered in blood and sand when you first saw it. And I still thought you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Jake pulled back enough to look at her. Because I could see who you were underneath. The fighter. The survivor. The woman who wouldn't quit. Clara's hand found his face tracing the lines of his jaw. We're both fools. Probably. This probably won't work. Probably not. But we're doing it anyway. Yeah, Jake smiled. We're doing it anyway. He kissed her again, deeper this time, slower, a conversation without words. And when sleep finally came, it came with their arms wrapped around each other and their hearts beating in sync. Married, home, together. The first weeks of marriage brought adjustments, complications, small battles that flared and faded. Clara wanted to help with the cooking. Jake insisted she rest. Clara pushed herself too hard on her crutches. Jake pushed back. They argued about chores, about Hannah's education, about whether Clara should be allowed outside in cold weather. I'm not made of glass, Clara snapped one morning after Jake forbade her from walking to the barn. You're still healing. I've been healing for 3 months. I need to move. You need to not fall on your face in the mud. I won't. You fell yesterday. Clara's jaw tightened. That was different. How? The ground was uneven. I didn't see the rock. The ground outside is always uneven. There are always rocks. Jake blocked the doorway with his body. You're not going out alone. Then come with me. I've got work. Your work can wait 5 minutes while your wife gets some fresh air. Clara's chin lifted. Unless you'd prefer I stay cooped up in here until spring? They glared at each other. The fire crackled. Somewhere outside, a horse whinnied. Then Jake's shoulders dropped. 10 minutes. 20. 15. And you hold my arm the whole time. Done. He helped her outside, moving slow enough for her crutches. The morning air bit at Clara's lungs, sharp, clean, alive. God, I missed this, she breathed. Missed what? Being outside. Moving. Feeling like a person instead of an invalid. Jake's grip tightened on her elbow. You were never an invalid. I felt like one. Feeling ain't the same as being. Clara stopped walking. Turned to look at him. You always do that? Do what? Say things that make me feel better without actually saying anything. It's a gift. She laughed, then lost her balance. Jake caught her before she could fall. See? His voice was smug. This is why you need me. I never said I didn't need you. Clara steadied herself against his chest. I said I don't need to be treated like I'll shatter. There's a difference. There's a big difference. She met his eyes. I want to be your partner, Jake, not your patient. Something shifted in his expression, understanding maybe, or recognition. You're right, he said slowly. I've been treating you like you're fragile. I'm not fragile. I know, but after Maggie... He stopped. Clara waited. After Maggie. Jake continued, his voice rougher now. I got used to being careful. She was fragile. Everything scared her. Every risk felt like it might break her. He shook his head. I forgot that not everyone is the same. I'm not Maggie. No, you're not. Jake's hand found her face. You're stronger than she ever was. Stronger than me, probably. I need to remember that. So you'll stop treating me like glass? I'll try. His thumb brushed her cheek. But you've got to promise me something. What? When you're hurting, tell me. Don't hide it. Don't push through just to prove you can. His eyes held hers. I'm your husband. Let me help carry the load. Clara's throat tightened. I'm not used to that. I know. Neither am I. Jake leaned his forehead against hers. We'll learn together. They stood there in the cold, holding each other, breathing the same air. Two broken people learning to lean on each other instead of standing alone. I love you, Clara whispered. I love you too. Jake pulled back, his eyes crinkling. Now let's get inside before you freeze. I don't want to explain to Doc Whitman how I let my wife catch pneumonia 2 weeks after the wedding. You're impossible. So you've said. But she was smiling as she let him lead her back inside. Winter came hard that year. By December, snow had piled waist-high against the cabin walls. The world shrunk to the space between 4 walls, and the 3 of them learned to navigate it together. Hannah's education became Clara's domain. They spent mornings at the kitchen table working through arithmetic and spelling and the geography of places none of them had ever seen. Why do I need to know where France is? Hannah demanded one particularly restless afternoon. I'm never going to France. You might. No, I won't. I'm going to stay on this ranch forever and marry a cowboy and raise horses. Even cowboys' wives should know where France is. Why? Clara set down her pen. Because the world is bigger than this ranch, Hannah. Bigger than Montana. And even if you never leave, knowing about other places makes you smarter, less afraid. Clara caught her stepdaughter's hand. I spent 30 years afraid of everything outside my small world. Afraid because I didn't understand it. Don't make my mistake. Hannah chewed her lip. Were you really afraid of things? Terrified, all the time. But you crawled through a desert. That was different. That was... Clara paused. How to explain it to a 7-year-old? That was fear, pushing me forward instead of holding me back. I don't understand. Fear can make you run away from things, or it can make you run toward them. Clara smiled. The desert was scary, but staying still was scarier. So I moved. Hannah absorbed this with the particular seriousness she brought to all important conversations. Is that why you came to Montana? Because staying in Virginia was scarier? Yes, exactly. And Papa wasn't scary. Clara thought about Jake, about his steady hands and patient voice, and the way he looked at her like she was something precious. Your Papa, she said slowly, was the least scary thing I'd ever found. Because he's good, because he sees me. Clara squeezed Hannah's hand. Really sees me. Not who I pretend to be. Not who I think I should be. Just me. Hannah nodded like this made perfect sense. I see you too. I know you do, sweetheart. And I'm not scared of you anymore. Were you scared of me before? A little. Hannah's voice went small. When you first came, I was scared you'd be mean, or that you'd leave like Mama did. Clara's heart cracked. Your Mama didn't want to leave you. I know, but she did anyway. Hannah's eyes glistened. Sometimes people leave even when they don't want to. That's true. Clara pulled Hannah into her lap, ignoring the protest from her healing legs. But I'm not going anywhere. I made a promise. Promises can be broken. Not mine. Clara held Hannah tighter. I crawled through a desert to get here. Remember? You think a little snow is going to make me leave? Hannah laughed wetly against Clara's shoulder. That's silly. Very silly. Now. Clara reached for the geography book. Let's find France. December 23rd brought a visitor. Jake was out checking the livestock when the sound of hoofbeats reached the cabin. Clara looked up from the bread she was kneading, her hands going still. Hannah, go to your room. But now. The child obeyed, something in Clara's tone brooking no argument. Clara wiped her hands on her apron, then reached for the rifle Jake kept beside the door. She'd never fired one before, wasn't sure she could, but the weight of it felt better than empty hands. A knock. Who's there? Looking for Mrs. Clara Whitfield. The voice was male, unfamiliar. Got a message from Virginia. Clara's blood went cold. Virginia. Edmund Crane. She's not here. Clara called through the door. The station master in town said different. Said she married a rancher named Mercer. Said this was the place. Damn Hiram Fletcher and his loose tongue. What do you want? Just to deliver a message, ma'am. Got a letter here from Reverend Crane. He asked me to put it in her hand personally. Clara's grip tightened on the rifle. Leave it on the porch. I'll see she gets it. He was real specific, ma'am. In her hand. No one else's. Then you can tell Reverend Crane that Mrs. Whitfield isn't interested in his correspondence. Silence. Then, ma'am, I don't mean no trouble. I'm just a courier. Got paid to deliver a letter, that's all. If you don't want it, I'll tell him that. But he ain't gonna like it. I don't care what he likes. More silence. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. All right then. The voice sounded resigned. I'll leave it here. What you do with it is your business. She heard footsteps, the creak of the porch boards, then hoofbeats fading into the distance. Clara waited a full 5 minutes before opening the door. The letter sat on the porch white against the weathered wood, her name written in elegant script. She picked it up with trembling fingers. Mama! Hannah's voice came from behind her. Who was that? No one, sweetheart. Go back to your lessons. But, please, Hannah, I need a moment. The child retreated. Clara closed the door and leaned against it, staring at the letter in her hands. She should burn it, should throw it in the fire and pretend it never came. Instead, she opened it. The handwriting was familiar, elegant, controlled. My dearest Clara, I trust this letter finds you well in your new circumstances. Word has reached me of your survival of the stage accident and your subsequent marriage to a rancher in Montana Territory. I confess I was surprised. When I heard of the wreck, I assumed the worst. To learn that you not only survived, but thrived well. You continue to exceed expectations. However, I feel compelled to remind you that certain matters between us remain unresolved. Matters that might prove embarrassing. if they were to reach your new husband's ears. I will be traveling west in the spring. Business brings me to Montana, and I find myself curious to see what kind of life you've built. Until then, I remain your faithful servant, Edmund Crane. Clara's hands shook so badly the letter rattled. He knew. He knew where she was, and he was coming. The door opened. Jake's voice filled the space. Clara, what's wrong? She looked up at her husband, at the concern in his eyes, at the man who'd ridden into a desert to save her. And she made a decision. We need to talk, she said. There's something you should know. Jake read the letter twice. His face didn't change, but Clara watched his knuckles go white around the paper. Who is Edmund Crane? A reverend, in Virginia. Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. He was the minister at the church the Thorntons attended. And he took an interest in me, said he could help me find a new position after the scandal. Clara forced herself to meet Jake's eyes. He didn't want to help me, he wanted to own me. Own you how? The way men like him own things, through leverage, through fear. Clara's hands twisted in her lap. When I refused him, he threatened to destroy my reputation, said he'd make sure I never worked again. Jake's jaw tightened. That why you left Virginia? Partly. That, and there was nothing left for me there anyway. Clara reached for the letter. I thought I'd escaped him. I thought 3,000 miles would be enough. Apparently not. Apparently not. Silence stretched between them. Clara waited for the questions, the accusations, the doubt that would inevitably follow. Instead, Jake crumpled the letter and threw it into the fire. He's not getting near you. Jake, I don't care who he is. I don't care what he thinks he has on you. Jake's voice went hard as iron. You're my wife. This is my land. He sets foot here without invitation, I'll put him in the ground. You can't just... I can and I will. Jake caught her shoulders, his grip firm but gentle. Listen to me, Clara. Whatever happened in Virginia, whatever he thinks he knows, it doesn't matter. Not to me, not to Hannah, not to anyone who counts. He'll spread rumors. He'll tell people. Let him tell the whole damn territory. Jake's eyes burned. You think anyone in Copper Creek is going to believe some fancy Eastern preacher over the woman who crawled through Devil's Gorge? Over my wife. Clara's vision blurred. You don't understand. Men like Edmund Crane don't stop. They don't give up. They've never met me. Jake pulled her against his chest. They've never met you. Not the real you. The woman who survived what should have killed her. The woman who chose to fight when dying would have been easier. What if it's not enough? It's always enough. Jake's arms tightened. You're always enough. Clara broke. The tears she'd been holding back for weeks, months, maybe years finally spilled over. She sobbed against her husband's chest, and he held her through it steady as stone. We'll face him together, Jake said when the worst had passed. Whatever he brings, whatever he threatens, we face it as a family. Together? Clara whispered. Together. Winter melted into spring. The snow retreated, revealing green beneath. Clara's legs grew stronger. She could walk now with only a cane, though the limp in her right leg would never fully disappear. She didn't mind. The limp was proof. Evidence that she'd survived something that should have killed her. Hannah started calling it her adventure leg. Because it has adventures, the child explained solemnly. Regular legs just walk. Yours has stories. Stories about what? About being brave, about not giving up. Hannah traced a finger along the scars on Clara's ankle. Every scar is a chapter. Clara pulled her stepdaughter close. Then I have a very long book. The best books are long. April arrived with wildflowers and the sound of rushing water as the creek swelled with snowmelt. Jake worked dawn to dusk, catching up on the ranch work that had fallen behind during the winter. Clara managed the house, the accounts, the 1,000 small tasks that kept their world turning. They'd settled into a rhythm, a partnership, something real. And then Edmund Crane appeared. He rode up on a Tuesday afternoon mounted on a fine horse that looked out of place against the rough Montana landscape. Behind him came two men hard-looking, hired for muscle. Clara saw them from the kitchen window. Her blood went cold. "Hannah, go to your room." "But now!" The child ran. Clara reached for the rifle, then heard Jake's voice from outside. "Help you, gentlemen. I'm looking for Clara Whitfield." Crane's voice carried through the walls, smooth, cultured wrong. "Though I understand she goes by Mercer now." "That's my wife. She ain't available." "I think she'll make herself available for me." A pause. "We have history." "I know all about your history." Jake's voice didn't waver. "I also know you ain't welcome here." "That's rather hostile for a man of God." "You ain't a man of God. You're a snake in preacher's clothing." Jake's boots crunched on gravel. "Now turn around and ride back to whatever hole you crawled out of." "I'm afraid I can't do that." Crane's tone hardened. "Your wife owes me a debt. I've come to collect." "She owes you nothing." "That's for her to say, not you." Clara couldn't stay hidden any longer. Couldn't let Jake face this alone. She grabbed her cane and walked out onto the porch. Crane's eyes found her immediately. They traveled over her body, the cane, the limp, the scars still visible on her hands. "My dear Clara, you've looked better." "And you've always looked exactly like what you are." Something flickered behind Crane's polished exterior. Sharp tongue. "I'd forgotten that about you." "You forgot a lot of things, like the fact that I'm not your property." "No." Crane dismounted, handing his reins to one of his men. "Then explain why you ran, why you fled 3,000 miles rather than face me." "I didn't run from you. I ran toward something better." Clara's grip tightened on her cane. "And I found it." "Found what? A dirt farmer?" "A shack in the wilderness." Crane's laugh was ugly. "You could have had comfort, position, security." "I could have had a cage." Clara stepped forward, ignoring the protest from her leg. "A gilded cage maybe, but still a cage. I'm done being caged." "You're being dramatic." "I'm being honest, something you wouldn't recognize." Jake moved to stand beside Clara, his hand finding the small of her back. A united front. Crane noticed. His eyes narrowed. "Touching. But it doesn't change why I'm here." He reached into his coat and produced a document. "This is a statement from Mrs. Thornton. In it, she attests that you stole jewelry from her home, that you were dismissed for theft." Clara's stomach dropped. "That's a lie." "Is it?" "Mrs. Thornton seems quite certain." Crane unfolded the paper. "She's prepared to testify, in court if necessary." "Mrs. Thornton is dead." "Her daughter isn't." Crane smiled. "Margaret Thornton Crawford is very much alive, and she remembers the scandal quite clearly." "Margaret was a child when that happened. She doesn't know—" "She knows what I've told her." Crane's smile widened. "I've been very helpful to the Thornton family since your departure. Very generous. In return, they've been cooperative about certain matters." Clara's blood ran cold. Margaret. Little Margaret who Clara had taught to read, who she'd comforted during nightmares, who she'd loved like her own. Twisted against her by a monster. "What do you want?" Jake's voice cut through like a blade. "What I've always wanted." Crane's eyes fixed on Clara. Her. "She's not for sale." "Everything's for sale. It's just a matter of price." Crane folded the document. "Withdraw your claim on this woman. Annul the marriage. Let her return to Virginia with me. In exchange, I'll destroy this statement and any record of the scandal." "And if I refuse?" "Then I'll take this to the territorial authorities. I'll have your wife arrested for theft. I'll make sure every newspaper from here to San Francisco prints the story." Crane's voice hardened. "I'll destroy you both." Silence. The wind blew. One of Crane's horses stamped impatiently. Then Clara laughed. It wasn't a pleasant laugh. It was sharp, bitter, born of years of suppressed rage, finally finding release. "You think I care about newspapers?" She stepped forward, her cane striking the ground like a gavel. "You think I'm afraid of your threats? You should be." "I crawled through a desert with broken legs, Edmund. I lay in a canyon for 5 days dying inch by inch, because I made a promise." Clara stopped 3 feet from him, close enough to see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "You think a piece of paper scares me? You think lies from bought witnesses frighten me? Clara, I'm not finished." Her voice cracked like a whip. "You've spent your whole life thinking you can control people, thinking your money and your position and your pretty words make you powerful." She shook her head. "But real power isn't about what you have. It's about what you're willing to lose." "And what are you willing to lose?" "Everything." Clara didn't blink. "I already lost everything once. My family, my position, my reputation, and I survived. I didn't just survive, I rebuilt. From nothing. From ruins." Her chin lifted. "You can't scare someone who's already been through hell." Crane's composure cracked. Just for a moment. Just enough. "You're bluffing." "Try me." Clara stepped closer. "Bring your accusations. Bring your false witnesses. Bring the whole damn territorial government." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I will fight you in every court. I will tell every judge exactly what kind of man you are. I will make your name synonymous with harassment and abuse." "You have no proof." "I have letters." The lie came smooth as silk. "Letters you wrote me, pressuring me, threatening me, demanding things." Clara smiled coldly. "You think you're the only one who kept records." Crane went pale. "You're lying." "Am I?" Clara held his gaze. "Are you willing to bet everything on that?" The silence stretched. Crane's hired men shifted uneasily, clearly not expecting this turn. Then Jake spoke. "You've got 30 seconds to get off my land." 25. "This isn't—" Jake's hand moved to his hip. To the pistol Clara hadn't noticed before. 20. "You can't just— 15. Crane's composure shattered. "This isn't over." "Yeah, it is." Jake's voice was ice. 10 seconds, preacher. I'd start writing." Crane scrambled for his horse. His hired men were already mounted, clearly wanting no part of whatever was about to happen. "You'll regret this," Crane shouted as he spurred his horse toward the road. "Both of you, I'll make sure you—" Jake's pistol cleared the holster. The shot split the air. Crane's hat flew off his head. The preacher didn't stop to retrieve it. He rode like death itself was chasing him, his men close behind. When the hoofbeats had faded to nothing, Clara's legs gave out. Jake caught her before she hit the ground. "Easy. I've got you." "I was bluffing." Clara's voice came out shaky. "I don't have any letters. I don't have anything." "I know." "You knew." "I figured." Jake lowered her to the porch steps. "Didn't matter. You stood your ground. That's what counted." "But if he comes back?" "He won't." Jake sat beside her, his arm pulling her close. "Men like him are cowards underneath. They only attack when they think they'll win. You showed him he wouldn't. I showed him I was crazy enough to fight." "Same thing." Jake pressed a kiss to her hair. "Sometimes crazy is the only weapon you need." Clara leaned into him, her whole body trembling with released tension. "I thought I'd die if I ever saw him again. Thought the fear would swallow me whole. And I was angry." Clara's hands fisted in Jake's shirt. "So angry. At him. At what he tried to do. At everyone who's ever tried to make me small." "Good." Jake's voice rumbled against her ear. "Anger's better fuel than fear. Where did I hear that before? I said it once. In a canyon. To a woman who was giving up." Clara pulled back enough to look at him. I wasn't giving up. You were considering it. That's different. Not really. Jake's thumb brushed her cheek. Point is, you chose to fight. Then and now. That's who you are, Clara Mercer. A fighter. I'm tired of fighting. I know. But you don't have to fight alone anymore. The door creaked. Hannah's small face appeared. Is the bad man gone? He's gone, little bird. Jake beckoned her over. Come here. Hannah flew across the porch and launched herself into their arms. The three of them sat tangled together, holding on like the world might try to tear them apart. I was scared, Hannah admitted. He had mean eyes. He did. Clara stroked her hair. But mean eyes don't matter when you have family. Because family protects each other. Because family makes you brave. Clara met Jake's eyes over Hannah's head. Brave enough to face anything. Spring turned to summer. Edmund Crane never returned. Word filtered back through gossip and travelers, the Reverend had encountered difficulties in his journey home. His hired men had abandoned him somewhere in the Dakota Territory. His funds had mysteriously disappeared. He'd arrived back in Virginia with nothing but his clothes and a story no one believed about a mad woman in Montana who'd threatened him with forged letters. His congregation quietly asked him to leave. The Thornton family denied ever making statements about Clara. Margaret Thornton Crawford sent a letter to Montana filled with apologies and memories of the governess who'd been like a second mother to her. I didn't know, Margaret wrote. I was young. I believed what I was told. I'm so sorry. Clara read the letter 3 times, then wrote back. Not to forgive some wounds took longer than others, but to begin. It was enough. It was a start. By August, Clara could walk the entire property with only occasional use of her cane. Her right leg would never be what it was. The knee ached in bad weather, and stairs remained a challenge, but she moved, she worked, she lived. One evening she climbed to the ridge above the ranch. Jake found her there watching the sunset paint the mountains. Should have brought your cane. I needed to do it without. Stubborn woman. You married me. Jake settled beside her, their shoulders touching. Below them, the ranch spread out like a promise. The cabin, the barn, Hannah playing with the dog they'd acquired somewhere along the way. Home. You ever regret it? Clara asked. Regret what? Answering my letter, waiting at that depot, riding into the desert to find me. She turned to look at him. Any of it. Jake was quiet for a long moment. His eyes moved over the valley, over the life they'd built together. You know what I regret. What? Not finding you sooner. He caught her hand. I wasted 2 years mourning Maggie, 2 years being alone when I didn't have to be. You weren't ready. Maybe not, but I wish I had been. Jake squeezed her fingers. I wish I'd known that somewhere out there was a woman who'd crawl through fire to keep a promise. A woman who'd fight monsters and win. A woman who'd make my daughter smile again. Clara's eyes stung. Jake, I don't regret a single day with you, Clara. Not the hard ones, not the scary ones, not the ones where we fought or you fell or everything seemed impossible. His voice roughened. I'd live through all of it again. Every mile, every scar, every moment. Even the desert. Especially the desert. Jake turned to face her fully. Because that's where I found you. Broken and bleeding and still moving forward. Still fighting. His hand found her face. That's the moment I fell in love with you, Clara Mercer. Before you could stand. Before you could walk. Before you were anything but a half-dead woman in a canyon who refused to give up. Clara leaned into his touch. I didn't refuse to give up. I just didn't know how to quit. Same thing. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. She kissed him, then soft and slow with the setting sun turning everything gold around them. When they pulled apart, Jake was smiling. We should head back. Hannah will worry. One more minute. Clara turned back to the view. I want to remember this. Remember what? This feeling, this moment. She breathed deep. For 34 years I survived. I endured. I got through. But I never felt like I was living. Her hand found his. Now I do. Right now. Right here. With you. Jake pulled her close. Then we'll make more moments. A whole life full of them. Promise. Promise. They walked back down the ridge together, moving slow, their hands intertwined. Hannah ran to meet them halfway, chattering about the frog she'd found, and the game she'd invented, and all the adventures waiting for tomorrow. That night, after Hannah was asleep and the house had settled into quiet, Clara stood at the window of their bedroom. Jake came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. What are you looking at? The road. Clara leaned back against his chest. The one that leads to town. The one your stage would have come down if it hadn't wrecked. Long way from Devil's Gorge. 18 miles. Feels like more. It was more. Clara closed her eyes. It was everything. Every inch of ground I covered. Every rock that cut my hands. Every moment I wanted to stop. But you didn't stop. No. She turned in his arms. Because I had something worth crawling toward. The ranch. You. Clara's hand pressed against his chest over his heart. Hannah. This life. Everything I didn't know I needed until I almost lost it. Jake covered her hand with his own. You've got it now. You've got all of it. I know. Clara smiled. That's why I keep looking at the road, to remind myself how far I've come, and how far you still get to go. That too. They stood together in the darkness, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds, holding on to the life they'd built. Outside, the Montana night stretched endless and full of stars. The same stars that had watched Clara crawl through a desert, the same stars that had lit Jake's way as he searched beyond hope. The same stars that now looked down on a family forged not from blood, but from choice, from promise, from love. Morning came with the sound of Hannah's laughter and the smell of coffee brewing. Clara woke to Jake's arm around her waist, to the solid warmth of the life she'd fought so hard to claim. Good morning, wife. Good morning, husband. Ready for another day. Clara stretched, feeling the familiar ache in her legs, the scars that would never fully heal the body that bore the marks of everything she'd survived. Ready, she said. And she was, because the woman who'd crawled through hell had finally found her heaven. Not in perfection, not in ease, but in the messy, beautiful, hard-won reality of a life built on promises kept and trials survived. She'd arrived 18 days late, but she'd arrived. And that made all the difference.